Ole, thief! You think you can come here and steal from us? No, I didn't. She tried to explain, but no one was listening.
Duo and UK were deeply in love, the kind of love that made people believe in fairy tales. Their marriage was the perfect picture of happiness. Duo, a successful businessman, had worked hard to build a comfortable life. When he met UK, a young, radiant woman with a heart full of kindness, he knew he had found the one. He spared no expense in making her happy. He showered her with love, surprises, and even bought her a brand new car within the first 6 months of their marriage. But Duo made one crucial mistake. He brought his new wife to live with him in his family compound. The compound was large, filled with different sections that housed extended family members. Among them was Blessing, Duo's elder sister. At 45, Blessing was unmarried and carried a bitterness that had been growing for years. She had never known love, and men had never looked her way. Her resentment grew each time she saw another woman happily married, and when Duo brought UK home, it was as if a match had been thrown into dry grass. Blessing was big and rough-looking, her face hardened from years of disappointment. She had given up on love and buried herself in an obsession with junk food and red meat. Her room was often filled with the scent of roasted beef and fried snacks. She found comfort in eating, but nothing could fill the void in her heart. When Duo introduced UK as his wife, Blessing forced a smile, but deep inside, her heart boiled with envy. Every day, she watched UK from her window, observing how Duo treated her with affection. The sight of her brother doting on his wife sent sharp daggers of jealousy through her soul. Why should this small girl be the one to marry my brother? How come she gets to enjoy life in my father's house while I, the first daughter, have nothing? She murmured to herself late at night. As the days passed, Blessing's bitterness transformed into hatred. She made it her mission to make UK's life miserable. It started with little things, picking fights over who used the kitchen first, complaining about how UK greeted her, and even arguing over water from the GP tank. UK, being a peaceful woman, tried to ignore the hostility. She remembered Duo's warning, avoid Blessing, her body always day pepper her. But avoiding Blessing wasn't enough. The jealousy had taken deep root, and soon, Blessing decided to take things a step further. She made up her mind, if she couldn't have happiness, neither would UK. And with that thought, she made a dangerous decision. She visited a native doctor. Early one morning, before the sun had fully risen, Blessing wrapped herself in a large shawl and set out for the outskirts of town. The journey was long and tiring. She had to take a motorcycle, then a bus, and finally walk through a narrow, winding path into a dense forest. Her heart pounded in her chest as she approached the small mud house that stood alone in the clearing. The hut smelled of burnt herbs and dried blood. Skulls of animals and strange charms hung from the ceiling. Inside, an old man sat on a low wooden stool, dressed in red wrappers, his face covered in strange markings. His eyes were sharp and piercing, as though he could see straight into her soul. "What do you want?" he asked, his voice deep and unsettling. Blessing swallowed hard, but spoke with determination. "I want to disgrace my brother's wife. Make her start stealing. Let shame follow her everywhere she goes. Let my brother regret marrying her." The old man grinned, revealing brown, decayed teeth. "You seek to destroy another woman's destiny, because of your own unhappiness?" he asked, shaking his head. "You do not know the price of such evil." Blessing frowned. "I don't care about the price. I just want her ruined." The native doctor sighed and reached for a black pouch. He mixed various strange herbs, whispering incantations under his breath. The room darkened as if a cloud had covered the sun. Finally, he tied the mixture in a small black cloth and handed it to her. "Take this," he instructed. "Bury it near her window. From that moment, she will steal with her own hands, and she won't even know why. But beware, what you sow, you shall also reap. Blessing snatched the charm and hurried out, ignoring his warning. That night, when the compound was silent and dark, Blessing crept outside UK's window. She dug a small hole with her fingers, her heart racing. After burying the charm, she patted the earth and stood up, dusting her hands. She smirked. "Let's see how you enjoy your perfect life now," she whispered before sneaking back inside. The next morning, everything seemed normal. UK woke up as usual, cooked for Duo, and went about her chores. She decided to go to the market later, in the afternoon, to buy new kitchen utensils. At the market, she browsed through a shop selling cookware. As she was pricing a non-stick pot, something strange happened. A voice, soft yet commanding, whispered in her ear. "Hide it. Steal it. The seller won't notice." UK blinked, confused. The thought had never crossed her mind. But suddenly, her hands moved on their own. Before she knew what was happening, she had slipped the pot into her big handbag. A strange dizziness washed over her, but she shook it off and continued shopping, unaware that the shop owner had seen her suspicious move. At the counter, UK paid for a frying pan and turned to leave. "Thief! Thief! Thief!" "Oh," the shop owner screamed. The market erupted into chaos. People rushed forward, surrounding UK. Confusion filled her mind. "Me? A thief?" The woman snatched her bag and opened it. The missing pot was inside. Before UK could explain, a hot slap landed on her face. The crowd didn't wait to hear her side. Hands grabbed her, shoving her back and forth. Shoes, fists, and sticks rained down on her as voices yelled insults. By the time she got home, her clothes were torn, her body swollen and bruised. Tears streamed down her face as she staggered into the compound. Blessing rushed out, feigning concern, but her eyes gleamed with wicked joy. She let out a loud laugh. "Ah, UK, I heard you stole in the market. Ha 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 ha. I said it. Duo married a thief. Oni Oshi. You never see anything." UK was too exhausted to argue. Something felt wrong. She had never stolen anything in her life. Why had she done it? And why had she felt powerless to stop herself? Deep inside, a seed of suspicion was planted. But the worst was yet to come. Days passed, but UK could not shake off the shame of what had happened at the market. Each time she walked outside, she felt eyes on her, whispers behind her back. The news had spread like wildfire. Duo's beautiful wife was a thief. Some shop owners refused to let her enter their stores. The humiliation was unbearable, but UK had no explanation for what had come over her that day. Duo, on the other hand, refused to believe it. "My wife is not a thief. Something is wrong," he told anyone who would listen. But even he couldn't ignore the growing tension in the compound. Neighbors cast suspicious glances. Blessing made sure to remind everyone of UK's supposed crime every chance she got. "I said it," she would murmur loudly. "Beauty doesn't mean good character. Who knows how many things she has stolen that we didn't catch." UK withdrew into herself, but the nightmare was far from over. A week later, UK went to the bank to withdraw money. The bank was crowded, and she stood in line, waiting patiently. It was just another normal day, or so she thought. Then it happened again. A man stood in front of her, his phone sticking out of his back pocket. The same strange voice whispered in her head. "Take it. Steal it. He won't notice." Her fingers twitched. Her mind screamed no, but her hands disobeyed. As if under a spell, she reached out and plucked the phone from the man's pocket, slipping it into her purse in one smooth motion. A sudden wave of nausea hit her, but before she could react, the man turned sharply. "Thief! Give me my phone," he shouted, his voice filled with fury. The entire bank froze for a moment, then chaos erupted. Security guards rushed forward. Customers surrounded her. UK's heart pounded as she opened her purse and saw the phone sitting there. She gasped in horror. "No, I didn't," she tried to explain, but no one was listening. Hands grabbed her. A slap struck her face. Another followed. She staggered, but the mob was relentless. The bank's security officers dragged her outside, where the real horror began. Area boys, street vendors, and bystanders joined in, their fists raining down on her. Kicks, slaps, and insults filled the air. "Ole! Thief! You think you can come here and steal from us?" someone shouted. Her cries for help were swallowed by the roar of the angry crowd. Blood trickled from her mouth. The pain was unbearable, but worse was the realization that this was the end. She could feel life slipping away with every blow. Duo arrived too late. By the time he pushed through the crowd and reached her, UK's body was still. The woman he loved, the one he had promised to protect, lay lifeless in the dirt. "No. My wife is not a thief," Duo screamed, cradling her in his arms. His voice cracked with grief. "Something is wrong. This is not her." But no one cared. The damage was done. As Duo rocked UK's lifeless body, Blessing stood at a distance, a smirk barely hidden behind her hand. She had won. Or so she thought. The night after UK's burial, the compound fell into eerie silence. But for Blessing, peace was the last thing she would find. Strange things began to happen, things that made her regret ever stepping foot in the native doctor's hut. At first, Blessing basked in her victory. UK was gone, buried, and her name tarnished forever. The house felt quieter without her, and that pleased Blessing. No more hearing Duo shower his wife with love. No more watching UK move gracefully around the compound. Finally, peace, or so she thought. But the peace did not last. It started with whispers. Faint at first, like the wind passing through the trees. But as days went by, they grew louder, clearer. "Blessing, why did you do this to me?" the voice called in the dead of the night. Blessing would jerk awake, drenched in sweat. She would scan the dark corners of her room, her heart pounding. But there was nothing. She tried to convince herself that it was just her imagination. But deep down, she knew the truth, UK's spirit was not at rest. Then, objects started moving on their own. Plates crashed to the floor in the kitchen, even when no one was near. Doors creaked open in the middle of the night. The shadows in her room seemed to grow darker, shifting whenever she looked away. One night, as she lay in bed, Blessing felt a presence. Cold air surrounded her, making her shiver despite the warm night. She pulled her wrapper closer, her body tense. Then she heard it, a slow, dragging sound, like bare feet scraping against the floor. Her breath caught in her throat. She turned her head slowly, and there, at the foot of her bed, stood UK. Her eyes were hollow, her skin pale, and her once beautiful lips twisted in a sad smile. "Blessing," UK whispered. "Why?" Blessing screamed, scrambling back against the wall. She squeezed her eyes shut, chanting prayers she barely remembered. When she opened them, UK was gone. But the room was ice cold, and the smell of damp earth filled her nostrils, like the scent of a fresh grave. From that night, Blessing could not sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she felt UK watching her. She stopped eating. Her once strong body grew weak. Dark circles formed under her eyes. She walked around like a shadow of herself, constantly looking over her shoulder, expecting to see UK's ghost. She tried to tell Duo, but he ignored her. "Leave me alone, Blessing," he said coldly. "You have done enough damage." Desperate, she ran back to the native doctor. The small, smoky hut felt even darker than before. The old man sat in his usual spot, his piercing eyes studying her as she fell to her knees. "Please, take this spirit away. I beg you," she cried, tears streaming down her face. The native doctor shook his head slowly. "I warned you, woman. You wanted evil, and now it has come for you. The dead do not rest until justice is done. There is only one way to be free. Tell me. Anything." Blessing sobbed. The native doctor's voice was grave. "Confess. Let the truth be known. Only then will the spirit leave you." Blessing's stomach twisted in fear. Confessing meant exposing herself. It meant admitting her wickedness before everyone, including Duo. Could she do it? Did she even have a choice? That night, UK's ghost appeared again. But this time, she did not speak. She only stared, her eyes filled with sorrow. And Blessing knew, if she did not confess, she would never be free. Blessing could no longer bear the torment. UK's ghost had turned her life into a waking nightmare. Every shadow seemed to whisper her name. Every sudden movement sent her heart racing. She had lost weight, her face sunken with exhaustion and fear. She barely ate, barely slept. Even her love for junk food and red meat had vanished. She was a shell of herself, and everyone in the compound noticed. One morning, Blessing ran out of her room, her hair unkempt, her wrapper barely tied around her waist. She knelt in the center of the compound, sobbing hysterically. The family members gathered around, startled by the sudden outburst. "I did it. I caused UK's death. I went to a native doctor and made her steal. I was jealous. I was wicked," she screamed, her voice hoarse with desperation. A heavy silence fell over the compound. Duo stood frozen, his face pale with shock. His hands trembled as he stared at his sister, his mind refusing to accept what he had just heard. You did this. You killed my wife." Duo's voice was barely a whisper, but the pain in it was unmistakable. Blessing wailed. "I was jealous. She had everything, beauty, love, a husband who adored her. And I had nothing. I couldn't take it. So I went to a native doctor. I made her steal. I ruined her life. I killed her." Duo clenched his fists, his body shaking with rage. He took a step forward, but their mother held him back. Tears filled her old eyes as she looked at her daughter. "Blessing, what have you done? What have you brought upon this family? Please forgive me. I didn't know it would end like this. I thought she would just be disgraced, not killed." Blessing cried, clutching at Duo's feet, but he kicked her away, his face twisted in grief and anger. That night, Blessing had another dream. UK appeared once more, standing in the same pale white dress, her face no longer sad but calm. "Now that you have confessed, I can rest," she whispered. Blessing woke up gasping for air, her heart pounding. The air in the room felt different, lighter, almost peaceful. She sat up, pressing her hands to her face, realizing that for the first time in weeks, she was not shaking with fear. But the relief was short-lived. The next morning, the compound was silent. When Duo's mother went to check on Blessing, she found her lying motionless on the floor. Her eyes were wide open, her mouth slightly parted as if she had been about to speak. Her body was cold. Some said her heart had stopped from fear. Others believed UK had come to take revenge. One thing was certain, jealousy had destroyed her. From that day on, peace returned to the family compound. Dewar mourned his wife, but found comfort in knowing that justice had been served. And though UK's life was cut short, her spirit could finally rest, free from the injustice that had taken her away too soon.
Thank you for watching Story Beez. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more amazing African tales and bedtime stories. See you next time and keep the stories alive.